When there was the civil rights and the anti-war movement, there was this attack on public education, and basically its lack of freedom, its rigidity, its regimentation. As a result of all of that, there started appearing in the country what were called free schools, and our school was part of that. These almost always started outside of the public school system, as did the New Orleans Free School. It was part of the desire for change.
There was a time of a lot of ferment in the United States, and in New Orleans there was a lot less tolerance for the anti-war peace activists and hippies than there were elsewhere.
You can trace the free school movement back to the publication of the book Summerhill, which was approximately 1961. And I think it was really a shocking thing for a lot of people to read about this school in England, which was based on giving kids real freedom, real responsibility, running democratically, having non-compulsory class attendance. So there was an explosion of these free schools as soon as this movement started. The average lifespan of these free schools was about 15 months. I don't think you can say that they were failures, those schools, that they all contributed to a kind of a movement for change.
We started the free school with the hope of more engagement on the part of the children, more of a challenge for the children, and connecting it to the life of each child.
All the people when we were in college were being drawn off into the military. It was something that we felt very strongly against. We felt that somehow going to school, sitting in the chair, being told what to say, when to say yes and when to say no, was a great preparation for the military. And we didn't approve. So we wanted our kid to think for himself.
The school backgrounds that I came from were very traditional, and kids sat in the desks and they read out of books and they wrote answers to questions, and the idea of the free school was to get the kids out of the desks and up and moving around, and we were trying to create a new kind of education.
We were going to have fewer divisions according to grades, and it had fewer divisions according to subject matter.
So let's say a child was interested in baseball. You would have the book to read about baseball. Math, you would make up math problems involving baseball equipment. Your whole curriculum was evolved around the child. And we could do that then because you had all the time in the world to know that child, to develop everything you had, especially educationally, around that child's wants and needs and their interests.
We were all young and idealistic and wanted to change the world.
They were, like in the 60s, the late 60s, early 70s, a true rendition of hippies. They were barefooted. All the men had long hair. They had holy jeans with holes in them. And all my friends said, are you losing your mind, putting your child in that school with those dirty hippies?
I know all of us felt like what we were doing was a real important thing to be offering as an option to the public schools, a place where kids could go, that race wouldn't make a difference, that income wouldn't make a difference.
At the very least, there was an ethnic and an economic mixture that probably didn't exist a whole hell of a lot in the Orleans Parish School System in the mid-70s. I'm not sure that it does today, but certainly not then.
There was no distinction, there was no line during that time. Nobody, and this is the God in heaven true, you know, you hear people say, I don't see color. They didn't see color. It seemed like all of them had on blindfolds or something. They did not see color. Everybody was just, they trusted everybody, and they treated everybody the same.
To me, it was a very exciting idea that the free school was going to have 50-50 ratio of blacks to whites and as many other types of people we could get. Here was a real experiment to say this can work.
Not that everybody was the same as everyone else or knew the same, but had the same rights to exist and the same right to respect. Ultimately, The hope is that they would grow up to be people who would respect those around them and ultimately have a society of people that were more respectful of each other and empowered as learners to do and accomplish the things that were in their dreams.
Here it is. Unfortunately, it burnt down, whether on purpose or not. It's gone. But this whole field right here, to where the grass is growing, was the facility that we had the school on. And it's tragic because it was a gorgeous old building, had these big, huge staircases that came down off this wonderful large porch. And then upstairs we had a commune where people lived, and they paid the rent. We all paid the rent to live there, and that covered the rent, so the school was rent-free in this facility. I'm slowly approaching where the steps would be. The steps probably came out to about here. And there were these big wide steps that came down. They went to the second floor. The second floor was the main floor. And below the main floor were rooms, and that's where we ran the school.
It was just an ideal spot. It needed a whole lot of work, but it was a great spot for a school.
Okay, these are notes that I kept. So this is the very beginning of the school. I haven't seen these in 30 years. Well, it says here that the first day was very loud and chaotic. We had to move quickly from theory to reality. Zachary did not return. He barely lasted a week. He said he was pushed around too much by the older children.
We also had real trouble establishing discipline with the children in an environment that was very much, you're free to be whoever you are, and establishing that balance. None of us were professionals, either as educators or in other capacities. I don't think any of us were parents.
Because here we were with no funding, really no support from anyone other than ourselves. Some people burnt out, which was a common problem in apparently free schools throughout the country. So it was monumental, but it was exciting. I mean, we were all so into it. It was just really an exciting period because we were putting it into practice.
It would not be obvious to anybody that it was a school because it was not clear unless you were in a classroom for an extended period of time what learning was or was not going on, because it was unstructured. One, it was unstructured, and two, it was poor. It was never terribly well funded.
My God. 2 teachers at $500 a month for a total salary of $12,000. That's $6,000 per teacher.
Funding the free school was an eternal challenge, and it was something that we were constantly preoccupied with.
We lived, ate, breathed the free school. It was our lives. And we saw it not only as educational change, but as social change, a way to redirect America.
I feel like the focus of the school when I went there, I believe it was to find another way to help kids feel whole, to see that there's so much more to life than looking at a book and sitting in a desk, that you can actually be a part of the world.
If you walked into a classroom, you would see kids in different parts of the room. Some kids would be playing a game, other kids would be off in a corner playing by themselves. Some kids might be with an adult doing something. None of it looked especially like organized learning.
Katie was playing with the red and black letters. Steve was beating things with a hammer and a blade. And Dwayne struggled with the yearbook, but with help got through it. There was a way to drive your car to the back there, and somebody had abandoned an old convertible. But they used to get in that car and just drive all over the world. They had the best time in that little car.
I think that some people just thought we shouldn't be a school. And so we had to overcome a lot of bureaucracy. It definitely felt like an us against them situation, though.
One day, the fire department drove up and said, "We're closing you," just out of the blue. We don't know where it came from, but we didn't close. The kids would come to school, and then the teachers took them to Audubon Park, and we conducted school in Audubon Park for a week. And it took us that long to build the firewall and the fire door and get the school reopened.
I think because they didn't like the political views of some of the people who were there. They just really didn't understand what was going on. So when they looked around, it looked like chaos instead of kids just exploring and learning and having a great time. And I think some of those people didn't think that if kids are having a great time, then learning could be going on.
We really let them play too much, and that was constantly fueling that internal struggle of how can we make sure they have a great experience and simultaneously make sure they get a great academic education.
Well, we were trying to achieve both, that they would be happier and that they would learn just as well as other kids. That was the idealism. But some kids wanted and other kids could care less. And the kids that could care less kind of got lost.
I think I learned a lot, but I don't remember them saying, all right, this is what we're learning now.
Martha did a spectacular thing with Dwayne. She wrote down the words of the song, Bye Bye American Pie, and brought the record. While Dwayne and she listened to the song, they followed along with the written out version. Dwayne really enjoyed doing this and probably for the first time in his life calmed down while trying to read. He told Sue that Martha had found an easy way for him to learn to read.
So you were here then?
Little after 72. It was a tall guy and lady with blonde hair was sort of hippies.
That's us.
Yeah.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a long time ago, yeah. They had a van. It was a Volkswagen van.
Volkswagen van, that's right.
Yeah. I remember.
That was all when we were young.
Yeah. That was the days there. The days of love and peace.
That's right.
Now the days is violence and killing.
Right. Yeah, the revolution didn't exactly work.
Yeah. As long as they do what's right, and they happy, and you know, that's all they need is love. You show them love and try to do their best in school, you can't ask for nothing more.
That's right.
You can't ask for, even though if they fail, as long as they try, that's the best they can do. Mm-hmm. Love them for that.
The house is raised and there was absolutely nothing under it. So kids actually played under the house back in those days. Remember, we had little bitty kids. They could just walk right under there. And they played quite a bit under the house.
I remember there was one child wouldn't come out from under the house. He was down there for a couple of weeks. He had problems with his family, and his way he solved it was by spending about a week or two under the house.
I couldn't spell, but I was very politically aware at a very young age. The normal consensus was at my school, which was very anti-Nixon and pro-McGovern.
And so we talked about everything. I don't think that there were any subjects that were taboo at all. And in fact, the kids were allowed to do stuff that probably they wouldn't have been allowed to do in other situations.
It was an experiment. It was experimenting. It was a little lax and seeing with what I guess if the kids would take any of that responsibility on themselves. I remember it being wild and chaotic.
You weren't supposed to get into a fight. You weren't supposed to steal somebody's lunch. Like in a normal school, you're afraid you're going to get in big trouble. And at the free school, there wasn't really that big trouble.
Usually we found when the groups became smaller and smaller, a lot of the discipline problems disappeared when each child could have their say, could tell their story.
I think she lived down the street on Bordeaux Street.
She was the cashier down the street in the corner grocery store. And I don't know exactly how it all happened, but we became good friends with Jeanette.
All my life I wanted to be a teacher. Ever since I was about 5 or 6, anybody could ask me, till this day, you ask me what I want to be. I want to be a teacher. I was a single mother with 5 kids, and then here I am, somebody come and get me out of the clear blue sky, and something I've been wanting to do all my life, to say you could teach.
How we knew she could do it, I don't know. I don't know if we knew she could do it. But she has such a great personality and just seemed to get along with everybody that it was a match made in heaven.
This one giving me a book to read on the philosophy of the school, but this one talking to me about the philosophy of free schools, and I was excited. I believed in the free school. I believed in the concept.
She didn't know if we were crazy or what we were.
I think I was a bit weird because all my friends kept asking me, why do you have your kids in that crazy place? You don't know a thing about those people. I said, well, I've been there and I like what I see. And I think I had this insight that I could look at somebody right away and tell good or bad, and that was that.
All right, 3 things I don't want to do. Get my hair cut, I don't want to write with Ann, and I don't want to write with Bob.
When we had meetings, I would bring up, I said, well, I have the reading group, and I asked so-and-so to read. I said, Tommy, to read. And Tommy looked at me and said, no. And nobody got upset. I wanted to know, well, do I make him read? And the rules then were, no, the child will not read or get anything out of reading until they, in fact, agree to read. So I did this for about 6 months, and then every day I'm just getting frustrated. How could he know he doesn't want to read if he doesn't know how to read? First, we have to make sure they are capable of doing the test that we are offering them. Then, and only then after the test is mastered, then they have a right to say that I don't want to do this anymore, I want to go on to something new.
And I think that, and I've talked about this with other people who went there, that it really depended on the kids' personality to how much they learned of that. Some of us learned more.
This thing we call freedom is not absolute. It has parameters. So we began to develop those parameters, always with the goal in mind that the more we narrowed or restricted the freedom, the more we wanted to expand the education.
I remember also going through a phase of taming it down. I remember where it just got a little too much.
Till we finally got to the point where we imposed some structure. And the compromise was the sign-up classes. What we ultimately did was say that instead of you can do whatever you want all day long, you can do selected activities.
Where kids are given a variety of choices of classes. They must pick one of these classes and go to that class for the remainder of the day.
They were like folk dancing, batik, photography, and they had classes that were like, learning script and more academic things, and I just did not understand why anybody in their right mind would want to pick that, but kids did. There were kids who really wanted to learn that.
I think the really extraordinary part about it, and I'm really more interested from my perspective as to how this crazy experiment became part of the Orleans Parish School System.
There really wasn't enough money to get the basic things like light bulbs and toilet paper, which was something you had to have every day. So Bob was going to economize by cutting down on the heat. Well, most of the year that's just fine, except for those few cold days. We'd sit on the heaters to eat our breakfast and lunch, and it was cold, and my math students would wear their sock caps down over their head and their coats, and actually would sometimes write with their mittens on. Unless you could find people who wanted to send their kids to a school and pay like 2 tuitions, their kid and then another kid who couldn't afford it. There was no other, other solution.
even if they said in the very beginning that we were, allowed to have our own structure, we kind of felt like they could come down later, put their thumbs on us. That was kind of the downside. We didn't really want to be under the authority of the powers that be in the school system. On the other hand, it gave us, an opportunity to be financially stable.
We were all apprehensive about it because we were afraid of giving up our autonomy, but really that was the dream, was to be a public school and to be able to do it differently. So we started in negotiations with the superintendent. He gave us a book of all the Orleans Parish rules and regulations, and when we saw it, it's this thick. And we said, well, that's it. We'll never be able to abide by all of this. But when we finally waded through it, we only asked to be exempt from 3 things, and that was it. And they agreed. And then we thought everything was fine, but he wanted a leader. And at that point, it was really shared leadership. And we wouldn't agree to a leader. And I remember we stood up to leave saying, well, that's it. That ends the negotiation. And he said, look, all I want is the name of someone. Just give me the name of one person. So we did, and that was Martha Howden at the time.
The only thing I remember that was different is that the kids got free lunches. But what we did pretty much stayed the same.
I think we're still one of the very few school districts in the United States that has the free school, which was operated as a protest to public education under the umbrella of public education and flourishing within our own school boundaries. My recommendation is you approve continuation of the lease and that we continue working with free school as a part of the public school system.
The question, of course, in my mind was, well, is this going to work? Can it retain its philosophy as a public school?
The staff and the program was going through the typical difficulties of an innovative school trying to start itself up without a whole lot of guidelines, without a whole lot of help. And so I understood that there was this period of kind of floundering around, really. But I was really looking to see, is it floundering around with a good heart, or is it floundering around with meaninglessness?
If you try to run a private alternative, well, you have to constantly find ways of raising money. On the other hand, if you try to set up a public alternative, you don't have so much the funding problems, but you have the legal problems and the systemic problems with the bureaucrats who don't like what you're doing and see it as a threat.
I was sent this to, I guess, fill out, if I remember right. And it's an evaluation form. And they ask questions like emotional stability, posture, and bearing, which give evidence of energy and vitality in daily responsibilities. When I got it, I wrote on the form, this whole form is ridiculously impersonal. One of the major ideas of the free school is to personalize living. If someone wishes to know who I am or what I'm like, they may come work with me or have me over for dinner. And I signed it and sent it in and checked excellent. And this was our play area. And we also use this as a stage area when we would do plays. And there used to be a huge mural on this building. And you can see at the top, some of it's still there, the peeling paint. I don't remember what it was a mural of.
It was a cat in the hat, and there's a little bit of paint left up there. You see here, some of the writing is still here, where the kids sign their names.
We outgrew this place. We had 60-something kids, and it was really too small. We were getting cramped.
So we came here. And when we opened here, I think our first year we had 100. That was a lot of kids for the free school.
Free school, I think for me, did a service and an injustice. The free school kind of prepared me for a world that didn't exist outside of free school. Inside, I was friends with people of all cultures and races. There was almost never any mention of racial issues. We all were friends in free school. We, you know, when we had parties or something, we all went to each other's houses. We all played and lived and, you know, did things together and learned about each other's cultures and races. And after I left the free school, it wasn't like that.
For me, it was just so normal, you know, playing together with people from all different races, that when I went to high school, somebody came to me at the end of the year and they said, "Don't you feel strange being in a class and being the only white girl in the class?" And I looked around and I didn't even realize till she said that I was the only white girl in the dance group.
Free school almost made a mainstream society non-existent for me. You know, you're raised going through the free school, and in my household, to be very idealistic, and the world is beautiful, and we're all friends, and we're one, you know, all bleed the same under our skin, and all this kind of stuff. And then you get outside free school to the real world, and you come in contact with greatly contrasting perspectives.
Many of the problems that I saw in the beginning, years before, had not been solved, and in fact had grown as the number of children grew. Although there were slogans on the wall that indicated a child-centered approach, what I saw, in fact, was a very traditional approach. The staff was kind of set loose to do whatever it was going to do, and they didn't know what to do. So there was a great deal of what I perceived as chaos, as waste of time, noise. Even at that stage, I felt, here's a staff that is potentially very capable. They're in a good school, they care, and they have the best of intentions. It could still pull itself together. A stage where things could be more visible and more looked at was going to happen because they were in a public building, and they should be ready for it.
Can't remember. My memory is gone. No, I don't think it was. I didn't see a struggle. I do remember it was a big struggle.
One day Jim Charbonnet was fired, the next day Jeanette St. Etienne was transferred.
In the middle of the class, he didn't wait till the day was over with. I was teaching, and all of a sudden he came to the door and he said, "Come here." And I went outside, nobody watched my class. He said, "I dare you teach a class."
Nobody knew what to make of it. We were all kind of surprised, and I was certainly not interested in leaving at that point.
The area superintendent gave us an announcement that there was going to be a pool of principals formed, and out of that pool there was going to be someone picked for the free school. We screamed. We screamed real loud. I remember there was talk about chaining ourselves to radiators and calling the news media, that kind of thing. The response of the administration at that time was they were horrified that we would make an issue of this. They thought this was a matter of evolution. And I guess in their heads it was a matter of evolution. We didn't see it that way.
And we took a hardline stance, since one of the major tenets of the school is that you know, we should be making decisions about us, not someone else. And each time we would go to the superintendent and he would say, "I'll take care of it."
Just as quickly as I was terminated, I was somehow reinstated, is my memory.
And I said, well, the way we could get around that, if at all times when I'm teaching, I have a certified teacher in the room with me. So that went on for quite a few years.
We recommended that Mr. Robert Ferris be appointed acting principal of the New Orleans Free School.
Our actions were big enough that it scared those people who hate any waves to be made, and luckily and happily we were back, and the school year kind of went on almost as if that hadn't happened, except it did show us that there was serious work being done to root out what the free school was about from the system.
Every year it was, if it wasn't the truth, it was somebody would say, I heard that the New Orleans they're going to close the New Orleans Free School. We had heard that every year for 10 years straight, at this building. And then the writing was on the wall. I mean, they convinced us.
One night I went to a school board meeting. We were interested in seeing what kind of funding the school was going to get for the next year. And I picked up an agenda, and on the agenda was an item that called for the closure of the free school. This was in the summer, when the school was closed, the school offices were closed, and most everybody was on vacation.
I think there is this belief in education that if we could get everybody doing the same thing, then things will run smoothly. And the free school wasn't doing the same thing.
Some of the school board members, to me, really didn't have a clue what the free school was all about.
They didn't understand that the fact that the children had choices and had freedom at the school did not mean that they were running wild.
Our schools in this school district are facing a situation that presents some major challenges for all of us. I think at stake is the future of our children. When you start talking about cutting that $21 million out, you know that to do that, you have to seriously look at cutting personnel and cutting programs.
I picked up the phone immediately. We got the telephone chain going.
And within an hour, there were so many parents at the school, and we said that we were going to go to the school board meetings and talk about what was happening and why would you try to close something that was working for so many people.
My name is Al Gurrier, and I'm an 8th grade student at the New Orleans Free School. I'm a representative of the 7th and 8th grade class. I think that the New Orleans Free School is a school worth supporting, and with your help, I think we can save our school.
And we're all very glad you're not old enough to run against us for the city council.
This council does hereby urge and request the Orleans Parish School Board to reevaluate its position regarding the New Orleans Free School and take the appropriate step to keep this institution open.
I've been told by many of you, oh, come on, it has happened before. They won't do it. They are not serious. This time they are voting to close the school. Remember, death occurs only once.
And you see all of these parents coming in. They look like everybody from the judge to the hippies, okay? With all of that diversity, people felt a strength about being there.
Do not allow the free school program to be lost forever to the children of New Orleans. Instead, make it a priority to work with us and find the funds to save the New Orleans Free School.
Everybody rose up and said, it's kind of like it was the exact same spirit of the Vietnam War when we would say, hell no, we won't go. Well, it was, in essence, hell no, you're not going to do this.
What finally occurred was an amendment to the budget that would, in fact, maintain the New Orleans Free School with a requirement, however, that they bring their enrollment up to 300.
It was like doubling up from what we had. That changed the school a little bit.
We said, you know, that would destroy one of the tenets of the free school. It's just another eating away at what the free school is all about.
The school was forced to take in a lot of children who had been kicked out of other schools because they were behavior problems or adjustment problems. And these were the kids who were least likely to thrive in an unstructured environment. There was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of fighting. The educational process did not go nearly as smoothly as it had in the past. I was very afraid that the school would not be able to recover from this blow and didn't want my child to suffer. So we did some exploration and started looking for another school and made the move.
And it's a shame that the school board didn't recognize that they had a program that they should have nurtured and encouraged instead of doing everything that they could to destroy it.
It certainly had a powerful impact on us because we just weren't ready for taking that many new kids into the school, and it caused us a lot of trouble, discipline-wise. But ultimately, I think we got a handle on it. It took us a while. And the things that were so negative were so unpleasant, we kind of have blocked them out. They're kind of dead. And if we had to bury anything, we're very relieved that's what we buried and not the free school. So there's a very strong structure at the free school that didn't exist when we first started. There's no doubt about that. But it evolved from day one. We try to use much more of an independent project approach. We'll use the textbook, but the textbook, as much as we can, becomes more of a resource material. Math and English, we do tend to follow a textbook approach more closely. And throughout it, we try to offer an integrated approach, trying to connect the different subjects to one another. And again, to connect them to the life of the child. We're able to offer students choices where they get to pick and choose classes. They pick one class, they go to that class for the remainder of the week. It becomes their final period of each school day.
Okay, we're going to do sign up right now. We'll come back to this.
We have puzzle manager.
Who wants David with self-defense? Raise your hand.
Puzzle mania. No. Okay, Javon.
One of my running jokes about what I learned at free school is that I learned how to juggle. During the day, we did our regular classes like math, English, social studies, what have you. But after lunch, we had sign up, which I loved. Your mind kind of got a chance to really develop into a thinker, less than just a worker.
And there are so many different kinds of intelligence. The artistic intelligence, the musical intelligence. I wanted all of those to be developed, and I think that they have been.
Free school is a type of school that prepared you for thinking and prepared you for life more than school. You called the principal by the first name, you called the teachers by their first name. It was, like I said, more of a small family environment.
We don't want any child to go through here unknown. If you want to change America, the first thing you would do is mandate small schools. 300 for elementary, 500 for high school. If you have 4 high schools of 500 each, versus 1 high school of 2,000 each, you have 4 valedictorians. You have 4 salutatorians. And the larger we make schools, the less we have students experience success. Smaller schools, everybody's well known as compared to a larger school where a kid can get in trouble and nobody even knows the kid, so what difference does it make? You can't get in trouble in a small school and everybody doesn't know it.
When the children are able to be taken into small groups, then they're able to express themselves and get the kind of affirmation from adults that says, I care about you, I think you're really smart, I want to hear what you have to say.
When you have too many kids, it's really hard to know them, to really know them. So I felt like the teachers really knew all of us, and they really cared about all of us.
Yeah, you knew everybody, and you was friends with everybody, At high school, it's like different.
I mean, when you go to high school, it teaches you more responsibilities, and the free school lets you slide with a lot of things, and the stuff that free school will teach you was like on the other side of what high school teach you.
At my old school, it's just either you do it this way or it's just wrong. The teachers here, they actually talk to you about how you feel about it.
They just cut you a little slack.
They let you express yourself, they let you do different things. From my opinion, I learned more and I still have fun at the same time.
Because if you don't have your mind always on uniforms and so many rules, then it's a lot easier for you to concentrate.
When I was in for detention, you're supposed to sit there for 2 hours, but if you can solve this puzzle, you can get out when it's over. So I think one of the things that happened with free schools is that you kind of used your mind. You didn't sit there idle. Instead of sitting there plotting on new things to get involved with that may not be great, you sat there and had something to think about. And some of the best work I've done as an artist was in detention.
I guess there's got to be a happy place between coming up like soldiers and running and playing all of, in the halls and very loud. Chaotic to an outsider may look a lot more chaotic than to a teacher. You can walk into one class and it would be quiet as a whisper. And you can walk into another class and it would appear to be chaotic. But I can guarantee there's learning going on in both classes. In the early years of teaching, I was really still searching for a curriculum, and what I liked was that I was pretty much given an open slate to teach it any way I wanted. A school like this will let you be creative, and they've never told you that you can't do this or you can't do that. The main thing is to educate the children. And that, to me, is what makes people creative, is to have the freedom to try it. If it fails, it fails. There's plenty of things I've done that I would never do again. But there's some things I've done that I do over and over again, every year after year after year, because it works.
I took some courses in curriculum instruction, and they talked about two different kinds of education. One that develops leaders and one that develops workers. The one that develops workers says, sit down, shut up, do what I say, and don't think, I'll tell you what to think. The opposite of that happens in very rich schools where you're allowed to do projects that are mind expanding. And so the free school that has probably at least 90% of the children on free lunch is offering a leadership education.
A lot of people feel that they must hold this big stick over a child all the time. We haven't given grades since we started back in 1971. And what that does is it affords a child a chance of learning without the constant fear of failure. And we're not saying that the child is not evaluated, that the child does not have the possibility of failure, because some students do not get promoted at the free school. Not every teacher who's come to the free school has worked out. Not every kid who's come to the free school has made it. All we're trying to do is afford parents a different choice in how they educate their child. And to me, that's one of the great weaknesses still in the public school arena, is that basically most schools are pretty much very similar. We continued over the years to do the free school camping trip, and we try to do it the last 3 days of school. We have to get a large facility because now it's over 150 people. Back then, when we first started, we used to when we went to Arkansas one time, we just slept on a creek. It was a sandy beach. We put up tent, had no running water. We just had the creek and stayed there for a week. We used Bunsen burners to cook on, tents, whatnot.
Organizing a field trip is basically filling out a one-sheet form, letting bus drivers know where we're going, what day we're going, how many buses we're going to need, how many adults are going to be present, and turning that in. Then there's a roster sheet for emergencies that we leave in the office, and one with the bus driver, and the chaperones gets a copy of that and take off.
This particular school year, we're unable to find one that can accommodate us because it was already booked by the time we got to them. This has happened before. So this year we're going to get to Bayou Signette, I believe it is, where they have a wave pool and spend the day there and have a cookout. So it's a scaled down version. But we're still trying to end the year having that kind of communal experience. And it's been a joy all these years.
A very basic question in the minds of those of us who have been the pioneers from the 60s and 70s is whether what we know can be transferred to a new generation of leadership. What we did kind of grew out of our experience, and that's not what's happening today. There are some new younger people that are taking over and doing some similar things. But when you look around the country, it's those same people from the 60s and 70s that are still running those schools.
We don't have a lot of the experiences that some of the teachers who were born and raised in New Orleans and have been here and were here when the free school was first starting, who knew what it meant to offer a school of choice at a time when choices were more limited. We're not responding to desegregation. We're in a new place.
Well, when I walked in here, I was a little leery. When I walked into the classroom and to see the kids all engaged in what they were doing, I was like shocked, because in the schools I had been to and the schools my children were going to, you know, you sit down and you did seat work. And they were moving around and doing different things. It was just like a culture shock for me. I'm like, I wanted to come here.
I was overwhelmed this year. I was overwhelmed trying to do what I believe like the kids can get the most from, which is all hands-on, active learning, getting them excited, trying to do that with so many kids and no help was really hard, and managing and being a disciplinarian was something that I didn't like doing, and I wasn't good at it.
Kids seem to be coming to us with more and more complex problems, and we also get more parents who really aren't supportive of schools and blame the schools for their kids' misbehavior, and that becomes a major challenge, not just for us, but I think almost any public school in America today. We should be looking at schooling in America. You know, as we did back 30 years ago, we need to continue doing that. For this coming school year, we will have grown 10 times our original number of 29. We once hired hippies, we were hippies, store clerks, and firemen to be teachers. For years we had to deal with the question, can we be so different and survive in a large public school district? Today the questions are, is our rhetoric and our philosophy consistent with our practices? Has our institutionalization destroyed us? Are we failing? You have to remember there were two changes. One, we increased, and two, it came from a fairly mixed community to a predominantly African American community.
In the course of my life, a lot of the white people fled the area to go to school somewhere in other areas where they considered was safe. So I think actually now the schools are more segregated.
I think there really was a change that went on. Many changes. I kind of had this mixed feeling, like on the one hand I could see that some people were getting a renewed vision of what the school needed to do. They thought that some kids needed more order, more discipline, needed school to be a place that gave them strength and structure, whereas in the early days it seemed the opposite, like the school was a place that let them get looser than they were at home.
I went back to New Orleans and visited the school when I was in college. And I walked in and I just remember feeling blown away that this was the free school, because it just didn't feel to me anything like the school I left. It was so much bigger. One of the things that was so special is that it was so small, and so it was really like a family almost. What was lost in this process? You know, did they keep the spirit of the school? And it was hard to tell.
What I can tell you is that the free school has not failed. I don't think it failed me, and by looking at my sister, it hasn't failed her. They're still doing, you know, what they set out to do.
This is another big issue. Is this going to continue? And of course that question remains with the New Orleans Free School.
Both of us plan to retire in 6 years.
Yes.
Together.
6 more years. You said 6?
That's what I said.
6 years, that's right, 6. What we gonna do?
Party.
Party. Yeah. All right.
I think that it'll keep going. I think there are many people there, many young teachers there who I don't know as well, but who really like the concept of the school, who are having the experience of their lives.
I can't imagine that it would have that life that it's had without those people. It's from the spirit of those individuals. I don't think you can institutionalize that. And so I hope the free school would go about, die a natural death and let some new people start something that needs to get started, and that's fine. Nothing lasts forever.
A lot of people argue that at a school, one person shouldn't make a difference, that if that person leaves, somebody should walk in and fill their shoes and it should just keep right on going. I disagree with that philosophy. I think one person makes a huge difference, whether it's the principal or a teacher or a parent or a student, People make a school.
What's going to happen to it? Will it be, as it exists now, the only school in the country that I know of, public school, that's called the free school? And will it retain any element of freedom? That's a big question. But certainly what I've seen over a period of time is, under these pressures of being part of the public school system, it has been watered down and watered down. It's kind of a bellwether as to whether or not it's possible to have real alternative education in mainstream public education.
I do think that there's a need for a free school. We just hope that there will always be enough people around who feel that way, especially members on the board who have decisions about whether or not a school stays open or is closed.
I think that we'll be ready. It's a valid concern. The school was started out of the energy of the early 70s. It was built in that climate, and it's maintained its strength and its momentum because a lot of those voices are still here. When those voices are gone, clearly the voice of the free school will be different, but it certainly won't be silenced. We will still be here. We will continue to provide an excellent alternative education for New Orleans public school children. We will be a school of choice.
It was very memorable, very exciting.
Different.
Very different.
Yes.
Crazy, wild, fun.
I still get up in the morning and I still enjoy, I'm looking forward to coming to school.
Oh, I think I'll look back on it with great fond memories, but I also realize as I get older and I see these young people come in, they have more energy than I do, and that's the way it should be. And kids take energy. So reality says it's time to go, and I don't begrudge that at all. I had a great experience. I think we both did. It was wonderful.
Definitely.
And we'll miss it a lot.